Before the sun shall rise on you, each ghost unto his grave must go. Curse the ghost who dares to stay and face the awful light of day. And with that ominous warning, we welcome you to another edition of The Best Television You Never Saw, the podcast that delves into exemplary British television shows of the past with hope of introducing them to brand new audiences. I'm Greg Koseluk, and where is he? Glenn, where are you? And he's Glenn Mitchell. And today, if you dare to stay, we won't be facing the awful light of day, but rather we'll be facing Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, the ITC program from 1969. But before we start, we want to thank everyone who has watched the first 3 episodes of the podcast.
And I'd like to thank the 3 people who looked at the podcast.
we both were amazed, astounded.
Astonished,
and stunned. And
flabbergasted, lad. Flabbergasted. Aye.
and we gently urge you to hit the like and subscribe and share buttons.
Have they got a love button? Let's take it further. Let's not underplay this.
Absolutely. So here we are talking about Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, which is a program that, in the spirit of, I shouldn't say in the spirit, but it works. Spirit of the goal of our podcast, this is a show that you introduced me to.
Yes.
Yeah, you recommended it many years ago. It's probably about 20 years now.
Must be, yeah.
So when we were both just apple-cheeked youths in our primrose days.
I think we've wilted a bit since then.
Yes, just slightly. Now, could you tell me why did you recommend this to me?
Because it's good.
Yeah, I believe it's one of your favorite shows.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. Because you were asking me about good, funny stuff from British TV, and this has always been one of my favourite shows. In fact, for a long time, and possibly still now, actually, if pressed for one desert island movie TV series to take with me, among the TV series, it would be this one, I think. But I think it has just about everything I enjoyed in British funny stuff, whilst actually not being a comedy show, strictly speaking. It's a comedy thriller, you could call it that. And funny thing, when it was first shown, I remember, because I was only a kid at the time, what was I, 11, something like that, and I was slightly thrown by it because I was used to some drama shows that had a comic element in them, but this one was so consistently funny. I remember saying to my mother, "Look, what is this? It's not a comedy show, but it's very, very funny. How do you define this?" And she said, "Well," she paused and said, "Well, it's a comedy thriller," she said. I thought, "Oh, okay." and that has done ever since, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen when I was a youngster, despite the fact that it was a nominal drama. And yeah. I figured my friend in the States is looking for something British and funny. This is a go-to thing. So,
yeah, and as we're starting to enter into the Halloween season, yeah, I mean it's a perfect thing to you can have your friends over and say here watch this and be frightened in a delightful way. Oh, actually, it's not really frightening, but it does have that the element of supernatural in it.
To the point where there's a disclaimer on it on the Australian DVD set. That everything's got to have a trigger warning now, and this one, this is within grabbing distance. And I say grabbing distance.
We should have had a trigger warning.
We should have, just as a matter of default, just for ourselves, really, for our territory. But yeah, oh, I can't see the right bit of the packaging now, but it actually says something like supernatural themes, so they obviously think it's worth warning you about.
Right, and
So,
the show is it's the work or the brainchild of Dennis Spooner,
Dennis Spooner, yeah, who was,
who of course was I mean they just kept churning out these shows at ITC.
yeah,
So he was involved in Man in a Suitcase and The Champions and Department S and Jason King and all these things.
he
Uh,
because he got into partnership with Monty Berman, the producer,
Correct, the producer.
yeah, and I think was it Department S was the first thing they produced together, or was it the Baron? I can't remember.
I will have to check on that when we do the Department S or the Baron series. We'll be able to confirm
One
that.
of
So
those.
stay tuned.
Yeah,
But
but
I was going to say that he was intrigued with the idea of a ghost and the idea that his thought was if a partnership is broken by death, does it end?
yeah, uh,
And and the ideas of well, of course, you've had a lot of quasi, ghost stories, comedies, ghost stories.
yeah. I mean, he was aware of some of those. The one that often got mentioned was "Here Comes Mr. Jordan," and of course they had the Topper films from the Hal Roach
Topper,
Studios,
yeah,
which really set that pattern, I think. And there were a number of others over the years. And Spooner, I read somewhere, only one place, I think, said that he had an interest in the supernatural. I don't know if that's true or not, whether that was an assumption somebody made, but that has been said. But his early work as a scriptwriter doesn't really go near there. And he has an interesting history because in his earlier life, he really was one of those ones who didn't seem to have any direction. He was doing all sorts of mundane jobs and so on. And like a few guys, he seems to have started to find his direction when doing military service. A lot of them did either in the war or in post-war national service. And I think he got into Forces Radio or something when he was serving, and that gave him a bit more direction. And he became a comedian. Didn't work, didn't get laughs, but he could write funny stuff. And he was one of the writers on Tony Hancock's ATV series, the
oh,
1963 series, and he co-wrote some of those with was it Richard Harris, not the actor, and they were not particularly good. It has to be said because it was not a great series. It's not terrible. Some people write it off as being. I was looking at them again recently. They've been shown here again, and it's not a bad series, but it's not Hancock's best work. But it was an interesting thing for Spooner to have in his CV at least. But that's just an example of the sort of diverse material. I mean, he was working on things like Doctor Who, which we're getting closer to this area now, and the Jerry Anderson puppet series. So now we're into ITC land. And apparently it was Jerry Anderson who really taught Spooner how in television to give priority to the visuals because he'd always been geared to write the words. That was his focus. But having to do scripts for the puppet series that Jerry Anderson was doing, he was having to think, okay, look, right, you want a big explosion, you want a crash, you want this, blah blah blah. Spooner started to think in visual terms. And I think that really does come over in Randall and Hopkirk more than perhaps the other ITC projects he was involved with. So that's my little resume. Very little.
well, so Dennis Spooner took it to Monty Berman, and from what I understand, at first they had some difficulty selling the idea to the powers that be.
Well, they were all worried about the concept of death, it being, rather taboo subject. They were worried about it. And I think what swung it was that the Spooner's original idea, which we may come back to because it does differ from the eventual series, had been looked at by the Australian-born writer Ralph Smart, who thought, "Oh, I like this, and let me write the pilot." So I think he wrote the pilot and another one, and Lou Grade had sufficient confidence in Smart to trust his judgment, and he was impressed by what Smart had come up with. So I think it was Ralph Smart's original script drafts that swung it as regards getting it commissioned. But we're going to add something else about that.
No, I was just going to say that the basic setup is you have two private detectives. And I believe that I just saw Kenneth Cope interviewed recently, or actually, of course, he passed away last year.
Yeah.
But I saw one of his interviews where they called him up and said they want you for a series. They want you to star in a series, and you're going to die in the first episode. Which, of course, he found very intriguing, as who wouldn't, right?
Yeah, he said the guy who waited all his life to ring somebody up and say that. But of course, it was immediately qualified. But you come back as a ghost.
Right.
Yeah,
Uh,
but how he got to that stage is interesting in terms of the
yes.
casting, which I
Yes, it
think you're
was
going to come
because
to.
he took his wife out to dinner. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
an Italian restaurant.
in Soho, and they had already cast the Randall character, which I did not know before looking into this, that originally the part was done with Dave Allen in mind.
They were looking at Dave Allen, the Irish comedian, the famous sit-down stand-up comedian,
Hmm.
who had recently become a big hit in Britain. He obviously from Ireland, but I think he'd done very well in Australia. And Val Doonican, who spent just about every winter in Australia when he could, I think, saw him over there and brought him back to Britain, had him as a guest on his show, and that's what launched Dave Allen on British TV, as I remember. So yeah, he was a hot property. So yes, and Dave Allen was in the running for the part of Randall. I think he would not have been right, frankly, and they went to Mike Pratt instead, who was a familiar ITC name, as we know, already known to them, established, and so on. But yeah,
Well,
in retrospect, one wonders how Dave Allen would have played it.
the interesting thing about Mike Pratt is that in all the previous ITC shows, he's a heavy. He's either beating up the hero or getting beat up by the hero. So Mike Pratt, you always saw as a heavy, as and not even as the main heavy. He was always the 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 muscle, the guy who went out to the boss said to the henchman, "Go beat
Mm.
up this guy," and he that was Mike Pratt.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
he
in
was in. Oh, I was gonna. I'm sorry. He was
no,
in
no,
Gideon's Way and the Saint and the Baron. He was in everything.
yeah, yes, he was getting those sort of second villain roles, and in the films, he had a number of things where he was like playing a deadbeat or a hippie type or proto hippie, because it was a bit earlier. Things like the films like The Party's Over. He's in Roman Polanski's Repulsion. That's one of his higher profile movies. Um, One interesting exception is it may have been his first feature film actually, which was it's called Impact, and he plays a police detective, police inspector. And I saw a bit of that by accident once when I was working at the film lab years ago. My old day job was in working on archival film, and we had a viewing theatre at the top of the building. And I was up there one day, and they had a reel on of a black and white early 60s British thriller on. I didn't know what it was. I looked over, and I thought, that police inspector in the trench coat, that's Mike Pratt. I didn't know what they were running. And it was only much later on I found out that it was the 1963 film Impact. So there's Mike Pratt playing a policeman rather than a thug on this occasion. But
What
he had all sorts.
and what's interesting is, like I said, he had a reputation of serious roles, and now they're asking him to
Yes.
be in this thing. And originally, the man who discovered, of course, Kenneth Cope was well known aside from that, but the man who discovered him for this role was Cyril Franklin in the Italian restaurant.
Frankel, yes,
Um,
who was creative consultant on the series, as he was
right,
credited,
and
as well as
but there
directing a
was
lot of them.
uh, exactly, and there was a lot of tension though between the three stars who thought it should be more comedic,
Yes.
and the director and the consultant who thought it should be more, dramatic.
Yeah, and that accounts for the sheer variability of the episodes and the nature of those episodes, because you've got Frankel there saying, no, don't make it too funny. Kenneth Cope saying, we want to make it more funny.
Right.
Monty Berman just wanting a straight detective story, I think. And Spooner being open to all the ideas, really, because he was apparently a very amenable sort of man, and of course he'd been a comedy writer and a comedian, so this is more natural to him, and so there was this constant pulling in different directions, and there was apparently some response because the Americans were already being approached or involved in those. They were getting some feedback from them, and they were saying, "Oh, it's." I think what they were finding was that they were showing them ones that were funny, and they were saying, "Oh, we think it's too funny. Don't make it so funny." So they made a couple that weren't so funny, and the response there was, "Oh, we like these, but we kind of like the funnier ones." So they were having to go to and fro, and this before any of them went out on the air. Of course, there was no response from the public as yet because they weren't being shown until they were completed. If they, I think they said that if they'd been screening them during production and they were getting some audience feedback, they would have had a better idea of which direction to take with them, but they weren't afforded that luxury.
Yeah. So, yeah, the interesting thing too about Mike Pratt, like I said, he had a reputation before this as a pretty serious person, but the funniest episode was written by him.
Yes. Yeah, apparently he just turned up with a script one day, having been working on it, and it was credited to Mike Pratt and Ian Wilson, but I think Wilson sort of polished it over, really,
Mhm.
to make it, to a formal filmable version. But it was Mike Pratt's script, yeah, and it was the funniest of the lot.
And
It really
it
was.
was, and the thing is that the performance, because most of the comedy, of course, came from Kenneth Cope's character, but in this one, Mike Pratt's just having a wonderful time, just
Oh
being
yeah.
very, very silly with his expressions, and to go through it quickly. Um, his character has been hypnotized by an evil psychiatrist, I guess you would call him, and he can no longer hear Marty Hopkirk.
No, he's been drugged, so Marty's being
He's
edited out of his mind, so he can't see or
that's
hear him.
right, and so Marty gets the idea of impersonating the doctor's voice, which is this German voice,
Yes, a thick
sort of
German
thing.
voice.
It's telling quick march, left,
Yeah.
says, see that man, hit
Yes.
him with your left hand, and that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah,
And Mike
Mr.
Pratt's
Head.
just got a wonderfully insipid look on his face, like he's a total blank,
Yes, this
kind of.
totally out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the
So
meantime,
you can imagine that he wrote it and he wrote, "Boy, I'd love to play this. Oh, this is going to be so much fun," and
oh
it
yeah,
was, and it
and
was.
it was really funny in a way, or strange in a way, because the actor playing the crooked shrink, David Bauer, in this occasion is using this thick German accent. And for a long time, I used to wonder if the whole thing had been post-synced because I'd seen Bauer in quite a few other things, and there was nothing in the tonal range of his voice that suggested that he was doing the German accent. And I thought I'd recognized it as being that of a well-known go-to voice man at the time, David Kaiser, who was an actor as well on screen, but also did a lot of voice work, narration, and dubbing for other actors. But on more than one occasion, Kenneth Cope remembered that the German accent had been dubbed by David Bauer, as well as doing his own lines. He dubbed Kenneth Cope doing the lines. So, except for the first time Marty impersonates the Doctor, that's Kenneth Cope. You can tell that. But thereafter, it's David Bauer. But it's always Mr. Randall opens the door and all this, and it's and from then on, it's David Bauer apparently. So with a wonderful, cool jazz motif, bass playing
Yes,
under Mike Pratt acting like a marionette.
yes. While he's giving
Boom,
him
boom,
the
boom, boom, boom,
orders.
boom, boom. Yeah. And all this, and I wonder. Okay, that would have been Edwin Astley's province. He did the score for the series.
Yes.
Go back to that. But Mike Pratt did, of course, have a career in music and would have understood the need, or at least preferability, for something to underscore these movements he was doing. Because one of the things that people tend to forget now is that he was a hugely successful songwriter and musician. He got going in the 50s. He was a friend of Lionel Bart, and he and another guy, I think, did a trip around Europe in an old taxi cab or something, bumming around Europe as bohemian musicians. And And I think it was Barter who introduced Mike Pratt to Tommy Steele, who was then just
Tommy
coming up
Steele.
as an early British rock star. And Mike Pratt finished up, part of that crowd, and wrote a lot of Tommy Steele's hits, or at least the lyrics, possibly not some music, but certainly the lyrics. I think they picked up an Ivy Novello award or something for one or two of them.
Hmm.
And then for the Tommy Steele's movies, Mike Pratt would write the songs. Things like The Duke Wore Jeans, Tommy the Toreador, which gave the novelty hit Little White Bull, which people still remember. That was Mike Pratt. And I understand he stayed involved with music in the early 70s. He was I think he had something to do with rock music events or some things that were going on. I don't quite know the details, but somebody told me about this. And of course, his son Guy is a rock musician. I think he finished up becoming part of Pink Floyd. That's I'm wrong. But either way, there is that
Yeah.
strong connection. And of course, Mike Pratt had his own folk group in the 50s and was part of Tommy Steele's band, which was Skiffle originally. So yeah, people remember him as an actor primarily because of Randall and Hopkirk, but the musical career was at least as eminent at the time. But it's all been rather overshadowed by the acting.
And the third member of the cast,
Ah, the lovely Annette Andre.
the lovely Annette Andre, who was
Yes,
actually another person who shows up in so many ITC shows.
even in her native Australia.
Yes, in the episode of The Saint, the first time I saw that episode, and she's playing a Australian lass, and I thought, well, look, she's putting on that accent, and then I realized, no, she's putting on the other accent. She
Yeah,
really was Australian,
yeah,
but
and
she was in everything: The Saint, The Prisoner, The Baron. A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum.
yeah,
Uh, Sergeant Cork.
Sergeant Court, yes, and but even well, before she came to England, an ITC series called Whiplash with Peter Graves.
Mm,
It was an Aussie Western, really, and she's in that, and that's what 1960, I think.
mm.
So she was working for ITC while still in Australia. So she apparently she'd come up through radio originally in the 50s and was doing telly by the end of that decade.
And she has the unenviable thing of being the person who can't see. You know, the main character who can't see, which is, I think, the one of the amusing things about this kind of setup is that, and we haven't gotten into it yet. Only one person can see the ghost, and that's
That's Jeff.
his partner.
Yes, Jeff
So
Randall.
yeah, so
Yeah,
there's a lot of I guess befuddlement on her part at times, and other times she just totally seems oblivious to it.
yes, remarkably so.
Exactly.
You know, okay, it's important that she does not know that Marty is hanging around as a ghost. Perhaps you would explain how it came to that, but for the moment, no, she mustn't know, but she seems to be remarkably unable to see what's going on. Even when Marty or somebody from the other side is sending messages that Jeff's in trouble and how to find him. Even then, she doesn't put two together. All this sort of stuff started to happen ever since Marty was killed. Yeah.
Exactly.
Suddenly, there's awful lot about ghosts and that sort of thing going on in their lives ever since Marty went. She
Yeah.
doesn't twig this.
No. Well, and there is the one episode where someone appears who pretends to be Marty, or the reincarnated Marty.
The Man from
And
Nowhere, yes, the wonderful
yes,
Ray Brooks, whom we lost recently, of course.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So and of course, which is very upsetting to her departed husband, who knows that the man is a fake,
yeah,
and Jeff Randall knows he's a fake, but she for quite a while she's convinced that
she's becoming
this
more
is
convinced. Yeah,
yes,
she's skeptical. She's trying not to believe it, keeping an open mind about it, but just allowing for the possibility. But she doesn't necessarily believe it, but she's going along with it just in case. And I thought also, of course, enjoying the attention. She's
yes,
got the attention of a man, and that's something that's now missing from her life. And of course, there are a few episodes about that, There's another one which she meets a man called Emil, who's also no good. Another
Yes.
con man. And,
She attracted a lot of interesting men in her
oh,
life.
oh, yes. And of course, Marty's terribly jealous. He was jealous anyway of other men looking at Jeannie when he was alive. And they were still married. But now, of course, she's a widow and a free agent, and she doesn't know Marty's around, of course.
And
Why
and,
should
and
she?
he's even jealous of Jeff Randall.
Oh, yes. Even though it's made very obvious that Jeff isn't interested in Jeannie, or certainly is respecting Marty by not going anywhere near Jeannie, except just as a friend and now a business partner, of course. She's inherited Marty's side of the business. Yeah, but Marty doesn't always believe that. I mean, if Jeannie gives Jeff a flower for his lapel from the one she's bought to put on Marty's grave. There's that wonderful scene, of course, where Jeff's standing in front of the mirror with the flower there, and it wilts, and it's Marty that's made it droop. Put it back. I'm not having my wife giving you flowers.
Well, even in death, Marty Hopkirk was very faithful to his wife because there's an
Yes.
episode where he has to go. You know, Jeff sends him into another room to keep an eye on this woman that they're protecting, and she's getting undressed, and he comes right
Yes.
back and he says, she's getting undressed. What would Jeannie think? So
Well, Jeannie's not going to know.
yeah, and that was his answer. Jeannie's not gonna. Who's gonna tell her? I'm not gonna tell her. So
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, he is very, very faithful. And there's one very small exception to this, and it's really harmless. And this is in Just for the Record.
mhm.
And he puts his arm around the woman's shoulder, and who's sitting next to him. And then Jeannie walks in, and he immediately sees her and takes his arm like she's going to see.
Yeah. Now, and the thing is that both Mike Pratt and Kenneth Cope were very advocating for her to have a larger part because there's
Mhm.
some of the early episodes she doesn't appear at all.
There are some
Um,
which he's missing, yeah, because
yeah.
they just didn't have, there wasn't a place for her in the story. But as they were all aware, as they've said later on, at that time, uh, women weren't getting that much. They were usually considered decorative, something attractive to help sell the series to America, and that was about the limit of it. Um, but they thought that she should get more, and Kenneth Cope, Mike Pratt made good and sure that she did. Then they would get together and they would add things, and they would just encourage the production to give her more to do. And there are a number of stories that are about her. She's not just an adjunct; she is the centre of some of the stories, which I don't think you would have got necessarily quite so much. Even with something like The Champions, where you've got that same sort of lineup, like two men and a woman. Um, I don't think that Alexandra Bastido, and there's a story about her as well, um, quite became the centre in the way that Gene Hopkirk does. Maybe I just haven't seen enough of those in recent years to say, but that's the impression I came away with. But yeah, they gave her a lot more to do. She wasn't just there for decoration or just to respond to things. She was taking an active part in it.
Right,
You
but
think
more so than like you said, the Champions or Department S
Department S, yeah, which
had
is probably a better example. Yeah.
the female lead who was the computer expert,
Mm.
and Strange Report,
Oh, yes.
where they had the third person. There was a young girl who was there because she was attractive, but she kind of helped out because she lived next door to
Yeah, she
Quayle's
was like,
character.
yeah, it's like the old gag about the handyman, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Just around the corner.
So, but yeah, so much to their credit, the two male leads made sure that she got a prominent part
Yes,
whenever possible.
yeah. And of course, she and Mike Pratt went back a fair time. She'd not met Kenneth Cope before Randall and Hopkirk, and indeed, Kenneth Cope and Mike Pratt hadn't met prior to that. But Mike Pratt and Annette Andre are both in a movie that was made about 4 or 5 years earlier called This Is My Street. So they knew each other from that. And I think Annette Andre also mentioned the fact that they'd done a play together. I think it was TV or stage, I can't remember. But they had worked together previously. So there was already a rapport there, which probably made a difference. But as it is, of course, talking about a rapport, that between Mike Pratt and Kenneth Cope was instantaneous, even though they'd never met previously. They became just as close friends in real life as they were in the series. And that's just this instant, clicking as it's people, which sometimes happens. And Kenneth Cope was rather fond of telling the lovely story about what happened after the screen test, because, of course, Mike Pratt had already got the part. They screen tested Kenneth Cope, went home, and Mike Pratt came round to Cope's home later that day to tell him he'd got the part, so he didn't have to wait for the news. And it was a really lovely thing to do. He didn't have to do that, but he wanted him to know as soon as possible that he was in. They maintained a firm friendship thereafter.
Yeah.
So,
No, and it certainly shows on the screen too. That
yeah.
And we haven't really talked about. We've been talking about everything about it and mentioning episodes, but we haven't talked about the basic premise. So the show starts out. The very first episode, as we said, Kenneth Cope's character gets killed and comes back, and for some reason, only Mike Pratt can see him.
Well, we can elaborate on that. Why he was killed in the first place? Because they're private detectives. They're not very successful. They scrape a living mostly on rather grubby divorce cases. And Jeff Randall has been handling one such grubby divorce case, tailing a rich man on behalf of his wife. And when it comes to settling the account, Jeff's out of town. Marty goes instead, and just so that they get the bill paid. And he walks in just to the point where the guy has murdered his wife. He's arranged to have her electrocuted in the bath. And so there's Marty nosing around the place, with the doctor around the police and so on, and being rather suspicious. And the guy responsible thinks he is the one who's been meddling in his affairs. Of course, it wasn't him, it was Jeff Randall. But Marty takes the hit. And so the rich man, seeing a loose end, goes back to the people who had bumped off his wife on his behalf and organises a further hit, this time on Marty Hopkirk, who is on his way home one evening to the office, outside his home, hit by a car, exit Marty, or not entirely. And Marty is a born warrior and also a detective. And just the evening after he's buried, Jeff gets mysterious phone calls, apparently from Marty, and thinks it's a practical joker, but overnight he's put into a sort of trance and goes to the cemetery, and Marty appears from his grave and explains that it was not, as they'd thought, just a hit and run, it was a murder, and he couldn't rest in his grave until he'd been avenged, it had been solved. So Jeff Randall goes on the case, and Marty can only come out at night, because there's the thing you referenced earlier on, this ancient rhyme he remembered about a ghost being cursed if he goes out in the light of day, and he shall not to the grave return until 100 years be gone. And of course, in the course of the action, he's forced to stay out in daylight and finds that he can't go back. He can't go on to the next world or whatever he's supposed to be doing because of this ancient curse, which means he's earthbound for 100 years. He can't go anywhere. And so he decides he might as well stick around and help Jeff, and that way he'll be helping Jeannie, who's inherited his half of the business. And that's the best I can do to encapsulate this rather complex saga for new viewers.
Yeah. No, that's perfectly sets it up. And so, as you say, he going forward, he helps his partner with cases, and always in his white suit.
Yes, and of course, only Jeff can see him or hear him, supposedly, apart from the old psychic, because he's chosen him. He has chosen one person who can see and hear him, and it's Jeff Randall. In fact, in the second one as filmed, But What a Sweet Little Room, Jeff, just for new viewers, I sometimes wonder why, nobody else can see or hear you. So, because I'm haunting you. He said. So that's what he's doing. He's actually haunting Jeff Randall, but in a friendly fashion.
Well, it was quite interesting because, as I said, he always appears in a white suit, white shirt, white tie. But what they did was they sent him off to Savile Row and got a whole set of these white silk suits. And of course, you'd figure that's a good outfit for a ghost to wear. But the problem was that they had to be terribly careful. When the catering truck came around, they couldn't eat anything sloppy. And
Sausage rolls were a favourite, and they're notoriously greasy.
yes, and he couldn't do that because you couldn't get a spot on the suit. Another thing that's interesting is they were very careful when they filmed it. Not Marty couldn't have a shadow fall on him.
Yeah, they quit on that eventually. You see plenty of shadows in the end.
Oh, did they?
They gave up trying. He cast a shadow, shadows hit him. Cyril Frankel, I think, was trying harder to avoid it than most of the others, but eventually they just bowed to the inevitable and thought, look, Peanuts could accept this. Let's not be silly about this.
Yeah. So, and he also had his famous hairpiece.
Oh, yes, because Kenneth Cope started balding when he was quite young. And you can see it even in the early 60s. We should say that on British television, he was better known originally for things like the satire show, That Was the Week That Was, TW3 for short, and the long-running soap Coronation Street, playing Jed Stone, a.k.a. Sonny Jim, for which he always wore a cap, by the way. That was his character, so he wouldn't get typecast. Without the cap, he was Kenneth Cope. With the cap, he was Jed Stone. It wasn't to hide the receding hairline, apparently. It was just so as to keep his characters distinct from his own identity. But yeah, even in TW3, the hairline was receding. And by 1968, when they were starting to shoot these, a lot of his hair was gone at the front, and the producers wanted him to have the full head of hair look. It wasn't Cope's decision. He would have been quite content to play it as he was, but they insisted on giving him a wig to wear. And for the first three or something like that, they got it the wrong way round. He said he used to look like the middle one of the Three Stooges.
Yes, he had it on backwards.
Yeah, and then they realised after about three of them that, whoop, turn around. Oh, that's better.
Well, and he said even when he was up in his 80s, he said he still had it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he used to bring it out every Christmas, and click his heels like a Nazi and nod his head and let it fall into the Christmas pudding. There's a Cope family tradition.
Yeah, he was more keen to retain that than he was the white suits. I mean, when they finally wrapped shooting, he jumped in, and the story varies according to, but it was either a river or a lake or a studio tank that they'd used for war movies, and it was quite filthy. But he made a point of just going in, jumping in, and getting it filthy deliberately, just to the sheer relief of being able to get it dirty.
Yeah, so I saw him interviewed probably about 10 years ago, and he said he wished he hadn't done that because he could have made a fortune with it on eBay.
Yeah, collectible. There are about three of them, and each of them would have been worth big money to them fans, after all. But
yeah.
Despite the fact that eventually they were being held together by Tipex, correction fluid.
Yeah, no, because anytime there was a spot, they just put essentially painting your suit white, and
yeah.
And I would have worn a white suit today, but I've loaned it to Alec Guinness, and he still hasn't returned it. So.
Well, he's like that, But yeah, I daren't wear anything like a white suit because I'm so pale that looking at me in a white suit would induce snow blindness. Everything just reflects off.
Yeah.
So
they think you were Marty.
Yeah, quite. And
exactly.
Whiter than he did. It was funny actually, though. Seeing those shows at the time, we saw them in black and white because most people didn't have colour sets in those days. And in fact, the transmissions began just before ITV formally went into colour transmissions. They did actually go out in colour because they were transmitting anything that was made in colour. BBC One and ITV was actually going out in colour unbilled for some months before the official launch. So They actually did all go out in colour, but most people didn't know it. But it was academic because most people only had black and white sets, and we didn't get a colour set until September '71, which was 2 years after that started to be shown here. And Marty looked a lot more like a ghost in black and white with the white suit, and of course there's the grey features and so on. When we first started to see them in colour and reruns, we thought he doesn't look nearly as ghostly as he did in black and white. But oh dear! But the pattern of the original transmissions is another saga. I think perhaps not for this moment.
The
Uh,
the special effects.
Rudimentary.
Yes, and but
Sorry.
the thing is, they've people who worked on it have since said, well, if we did it nowadays, we'd have a lot greater special effects. It would cost a lot more, but I don't know if they'd be any better.
They wouldn't really. This is the point. They were not sophisticated techniques, even by the standards of the time. People say, oh, they didn't have CGI then and all this. Well, no, they didn't. But they did have optical printing. And they did use that to a very limited degree because, of course, that's expensive lab work. And it's also more time consuming. They're on pretty strict deadlines. So it all takes time to do. And it costs money. But there were things like, optical printing. There was matte work you could do, and so on. And there's a 1951 French film with the comedian Bourville called Le Passepartout. It was the man who could walk through walls. In America, they called it, wait for it, Mr. Peekaboo. Yeah. Yeah, I
American
mean,
titles, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
We'll mention that in a little bit, but yeah,
yeah,
but
but the effects in that are wonderful. This does look like a man walking through a wall. There's no transparency going on. It's just like his body disappears through the wall. It's fantastic, and they could do that in 1951. But with Randall and Hopkirk, they contented themselves, say, with a little bit of optical work, a thing called the Pepper's Ghost illusion, which relies on using a glass to reflect a guy standing in the background against black velvet or something. So he's photographed into the scene because of the reflection on the glass. They did that a lot. The drawback being is that the guy suddenly becomes transparent and his mirror image.
yeah.
So
So he'd have to. So essentially, what they do is they put a piece of glass about 45 degrees in front of the camera lens, and the other person, the person who's being ghostly, has to be filmed against black velvet off to the side, careful only to light him, not the background, and he has to do it backwards.
yeah, yeah,
So
and it's an old theatre effect. It works in live performance, so it's not even a film trick. It goes back a long way in theatre, and yes, Pepper's Ghost is usually referred to as. So they use that, and mostly they use jump cuts, which goes back to Georges Méliès in the
yeah,
1890s. Simply, when he has to appear or reappear, everybody freezes. Uh, Kenneth comes in or goes off, and they just remove that section where he comes in and goes off, so he suddenly
yeah,
appears or disappears.
yeah.
And
But
that's that
they did it very very well.
they did. It's not easy to freeze, not to flinch, not to blink, not to react. And they kept saying they had to wait for things like cigarette smoke to disappear because there's a lot of smoke in those things in those days. That had to subside before they could do the jump cut. Otherwise, that would jump. But mostly, it's in the way that the people were able to hold and not react, not move. And of course, Kenneth Cope was very fond of taking advantage of that. Originally, he got in and out pretty quickly. Then he realised he could have some fun with this and he started to saunter, make people wait. But they were great. They coped with that, but
But it was a
it
lot
works well.
quicker than setting up Pepper's Ghost because
Yeah.
from what I understand, that took a lot of time and a lot of
Oh,
setup. And like you said, they were on a schedule. They had to move things along. Uh,
yeah. About 10 days for an episode.
yeah, and of course the most famous thing where they couldn't wait for anything. They had to keep on schedule was when Mike Pratt broke his leg.
Yes, he was a bit of a lad, apparently. Mike Pratt apparently was the everybody who knew him is one of those people there where people practically break their backs to tell you what a wonderful, lovely man he was. And so he very obviously was a wonderful guy, lovely man. But he could be a bit, a bit wayward, and apparently enjoyed a drink. And it was his 38th birthday during shooting, and it started with the champers during the day, and he carried it on, and it went on into the evening, and it finally got home, and he still had the guys with him from the production, and he hadn't got his key. He was locked out of his upstairs flat, and one of the standees or stuntmen climbed up the drain pipe and got it through the window, came downstairs, got the door open. So that's all they needed to do. He was home free. But no, Mike Pratt said, I can do that. He got up, and of course he couldn't. Wham, bam, down to basement level, and broke at least one leg. Again, this varies in the telling as to whether he broke one or both legs. But you do see him subsequently to pick up what they did, how they got around this, because of course they were nearly at the end of completing the series, and they needed to get 26 for syndication purposes at least. You can sell them in blocks of 13. That was the quarter and half year schedules for TV. And so if they couldn't complete the 26, they had almost half the series that they couldn't do anything with. They could sell the 13, but not the remaining ones. They needed 26. And they were partway through 25, which was Somebody Just Walked Over My Grave.
Mm-hmm.
And they got around this by, well, they'd already had quite a lot of the footage in the can, but for the remaining footage, they were able to prop up Mike Pratt in a standing position, prop him up in a seating position, and have him do his lines, and with the rest of it being filled in by a double. And I think I'd guessed who it is. I don't think it was his usual second unit or stunt double, who was a guy who was called H, Harry Fielder. I think they used the same actor who plays. Oh dear, this is difficult to explain if you don't know this shows. But in one episode, a guy impersonates Jeff Randall.
Yes.
And it's called "When Did You Stop Seeing Things?" Because of course the fake Randall can't see or hear Marty, and he doesn't. Marty doesn't realise it's not really Jeff for a fair time. But it turns out to be an actor whom the baddies have hired to replace Jeff Randall with a latex mask to complete the illusion, supposedly. And there's the guy who played the fake Jeff Randall. I can never remember his name. I get a block on it. I have a note of it here. I'm going to cheat now. Look at this note to remind myself. There's certain names that just don't stay with me, I'm afraid. And it's David Downer. David Downer, that was the actor. And I think it's Downer who doubles for Mike Pratt where necessary in Somebody Just Walked Over My Grave. So you can just see a rear 2/3 view of the face at some point, and I think that's him. But they managed to get that one completed. But so that solved the problem of the partially completed episode. But there was one that they're going to have to do from scratch, and he just couldn't do it. At least one leg in plaster, and it was going to be called. Was it The Dead Don't Even Whisper? I think it was called something like that. And they had to turn it around. It was only partly written anyway. And so what they did was complete it by reversing it, turn it around. Mm-hmm. And they had Jeff in the hospital bed, leg and plaster, Marty visiting him. And instead of having Jeff Randall as the living protagonist in the tale, it was Marty talking about a past case he'd handled before he was killed.
Yes.
So suddenly the ghost talks, that's what they called it. And so Kenneth Cope, for the first time at any length, gets to play a living guy taking an active part in the story. And it was a very clever solution.
He got to talk to people that way.
He got to talk to people. He got to kiss Jeannie.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
A real bonus. So it was a very clever solution. But of course, they could only have done it once. So the timing in that regard, it was terrible. In that regard, the timing was fortunate because they could place that anywhere in the series. It didn't have to be the last one. But in this particular case, that's how they got the series completed, despite Mike Pratt's injury. And but he could be a bit of a party animal, apparently.
Well, despite that, I'll bring up something. You know this is coming. That the device of Jeff Randall getting locked in rooms. So they did
Yes.
26 episodes. The last time we watched it, it's one thing that drives my wife crazy is that
Lose it.
this man is supposed to be a smart detective, and he's continually getting locked in rooms and he can't get out. So we counted it, and I think it's 16 episodes. She says it's 17. The difference comes because there's one episode where the police lock him up, and I said, "Well, he's not being fooled; he's actually being arrested."
Yeah, it's a
And
bit
she says,
different.
"No, but he's locked in a room." So it's
Yeah. The thing with that, of course, is that if you see them in production order, and sometimes I think they've been shown that way, sometimes on commercial releases, some DVDs, DVD releases, they're actually presented in production order. There's a big difference between that and the intended transmission order, because of course they would break it up a bit more, and so as transmitted, they didn't come too close together. They were more evenly spaced. But as a device, it's something they had to do fairly often because there are only so many ways of the plot needing Marty to be resourceful and try to contact people and get help. And of course, these days, an awful lot of these would be implausible because they've got mobile phones, cell phones, as they say in
yeah,
the States. Um, and in those days, there was no such thing. But you couldn't do those stories now because all Jeff would have to do is get his mobile out and say, "Help, I'm stuck
yeah.
in this room."
Who needs a ghost for a partner when you have a cell phone, right?
Exactly. Yeah. In the end, he finished up with a smart ghost instead of a smartphone. But yeah.
Well, the best episode of him being locked in a room is actually has room in the title. It's My What a Sweet Little Room.
With the room. Yeah.
Yeah, where
With
the villain has been killing people by luring them into this very nice looking room with a view of a garden and everything, but it's essentially a gas chamber, and so that's how
mm,
he's been getting rid of his victims, and he gets Jeff Randall locked in there,
yeah, he's
and
been courting rich women and systematically bumping
yes,
them off for
is
their
it
money.
is it Norman Bird? Is that
No,
or he's involved in that one?
he's
I think.
involved in it. He's an accomplice, but
Yeah,
it's Michael Goodliff playing
that's
the
oh
murderer.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's actually that's actually one of the straighter ones. There are comedy elements in it, but particularly um, Doris Hare,
hmm
the fake medium.
and that has so many good elements in it because that's one that in the DVD set in the
Uh,
network DVD set it's the second one. Am I saying
that
that here?
because they were presenting them in production order, I think. Hang on a minute. Let's see what we've got here. Right, this is the network set, and it's number 2 in network, and yeah, they've put them on in production order, and this is the Australian DVD set from Umbrella Entertainment. I should say that actually a guy I used to work with, a former colleague of mine, coordinated this one and did an excellent job. Jazz Wiseman, who did a lot of good work on this, and I understand that the elements now from the network and the Umbrella sets are going to be combined in a new Blu-ray set, so you get
Oh,
all of the goodies. So anyway, so look out for that, folks. I think that's going to be very good. But these are both
and
very good sets.
if you're putting that out and you want to sponsor a podcast, maybe we
Exactly.
could find you one.
Yeah.
But
Well, but
but
yeah,
that one
same again though. Same again. Production order. And
that
and here we
shows up.
the early one. I'm sorry. I could keep producing these if you like. I
It's
could pull them on
just
my
like
shirt.
Barney.
Yeah, I mean, who needs to pull rabbits out of hats when you can do this? Yeah, what have we got here again? Now, this is interesting because this is the old Carlton DVD set, and these appear to be presented in transmission order, not production order.
Well, and if you go on to IMDb, they give you, I believe they give you the transmission order on IMDb.
They
But
do, yeah, they do.
yeah, but the good thing about My What a Sweet Little Room is that it does show up early in the run, or at least in the saga, because Marty is still learning how to do his ghostly things. Because as a ghost, there wasn't a lot that he could do. He could make things move by blowing on them, and things would move. But in that one, I guess if he concentrated enough, he could make something juggle and move. And so that's how he rescues Jeff. In that, Jeff hides himself in a window seat, and there's a candle burning, and so he makes the candle
It's a
fall
lamp.
over.
He's able to throw
That's right, the lamp.
throws it across the room. He
Right.
starts in the office by rattling a coffee cup, and Jeff is rather sceptical as to how useful this might be. Oh, I'm sure we'll find a use for it. And Marty reminds him of that when they're in
That's
that
right.
situation. Get into the chest thing in the corner, and then light the gas on the thing. And then when the right moment happens, Marty can throw the lamp across the room to ignite it and blow the room up.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but that also has the something that comes up, that there are people sporadically who can see or hear Marty,
And
and
this
that's
was
that's a good example of that.
Yeah, and this was in Spooner's original draft. I think he allowed for a few suggestions for exceptions to the rule, people who could see and hear him. One of them being an old lady who was psychic. And that got used in the end, in For the Girl Who Has Everything. There were the idea of going to seances, and
Hmm.
they had a gag about Marty having to get in a queue of spirits waiting to speak,
That's right.
and they
They're
used
all lined
that.
up. Yep.
Yes, yeah, all the different types, dressed in different things like chefs' outfits and all that sort of thing, and different occupations, and so they used that. And of course, you've got the one other psychic. The guy tries to exorcise him in Whoever
Hmm.
Heard of a Ghost Dying, which is Charles Lloyd Pack, who
Yes.
was in a few ITC things, very ATV productions, and very well known actor. But he was another exception. And so in But What a Sweet Little Room, we have veteran by then Doris Hare as a fake medium, Madame Hanska, for whom
She's a,
Marty
so she's a phony psychic who
yeah,
is stunned when she can actually contact someone, or
yeah,
someone
yeah, yeah.
contacts her.
Marty said, made her day. She'd always thought it
And
was a fake. Yeah.
and
Oh,
dogs can
yes. And
dogs can
birds.
see.
He freaks birds out
Yep.
in Who Killed Cock Robin.
Who
But
killed
yeah,
Cock Robin?
but
Yep.
dogs, yes, he can tame a vicious dog, one that might have been trained to guard Jeff. He can get Jeff away from the dog by putting the dog to sleep. Go to sleep, Rex. Go to sleep.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Ah. So
Wonderful.
but there are, despite all the wonderful things in there, there are pitfalls. As you've pointed out, we've mentioned the fact that Jeff gets locked in rooms all over the place. We've mentioned the running order, but the good question you brought up to me is, why did they keep running a detective agency?
Yes, because there were other means of making money.
Yeah.
Oh, another terrific episode. That's how murder snowballs.
Yes.
Jeff and Marty do a fake mind reading act in the theatre. And it's a huge success because, of course, Marty can go among the audience and see what they're holding in their hands and tell Jeff exactly what it is. So he doesn't have to have any psychic abilities himself. He's just got Marty telling him. And nobody knows the trick. And it works very well. Jeff explains it when necessary. He's sort of working for the management. There's some sort of fiddle with the management. But of course, okay, maybe you couldn't sustain that if you kept going to other theatres. You couldn't keep claiming that. But that's the only reason why he shouldn't be able to throw in the detective business and do something that's going to make them some real money. So
Exactly. And the other thing about that is that, as they pointed out, we're going to have somebody die, and then only their partner can see them. So you'd make them a detective because there's so many stories that you can do if you're a detective.
That was what made it a detective story to
Right.
begin with. Yes, there are so many options from a detective agency.
So
Plenty
if
of
they
plots.
had gone into a stage act, it would be good for one episode.
That's all.
So,
That's all. He couldn't sustain it. Yeah. So we
right.
have to suspend disbelief again as to why they're going back to this down at heel existence in the office, when they could be making big money elsewhere. We have to just accept that. And there's something else about that episode that drives me crazy. And this is one of the few sort of real plot creaks for me. But I think it was a matter of timing because this I was surprised in a way that when it was written by Ray Austin, who directed some of them as well. He was a former stuntman. He went to America and did very well, but he was still in England then. And in one of the DVDs, he's doing a commentary on this episode, and he didn't mention something which I've long thought rather odd, in that a lot of this it hinges around a guy who murders one of the acts at the beginning of the episode anyway, and it turns out to be a choreographer in the theatre, a male choreographer, who for some reason does these things in drag. Now, it was never explained, including when he comes back later on to try and get rid of Jeff or whatever. He gets back in the women's clothes again. Now, it was never explained why he chose to do it in drag. That's one thing. And one of the people he nearly kills is a showgirl played by Valerie Leon, who was quite well known for the Hammer films and that sort of thing at the time. And he enters her dressing room and she sees him, recognizes him, and laughs because he's dressed as a woman. And he hits her and she's out. And she's in a coma, and a doctor is there and actually says that she's more dead than alive and so on. And they put her to bed, and Marty is standing in a vigil next to her. And somebody actually says, "Oh, if only she could tell us who attacked her." Blah blah blah. But and it's set up for this comatose girl to come out and talk to Marty and say, "I was hit by blah, Kim, the choreographer," but it's never delivered. It doesn't happen. Instead, suddenly towards the climactic scenes, Jeff suddenly notices the choreographer up in the flies of the theatre, and he's the only one knocked down among all the suspects on the stage. And he points him out, and of course then we get into the concluding chase, fight, and so on. And in the postscript, Jeff actually says it was just a guess, a lucky guess, which is a bit slender, really, for a thing like this, especially when you've got the potential for the ghost to speak to the comatose girl, which has been set up.
Right.
And I honestly think that they were running short of time, and they cut that, and they just did a cut to a quick denouement. That Jeff can guess who it was. But I honestly think they were supposed to have the girl communicate with Marty in a semi alive state. But I was hoping that Ray Austin might have said something about effect in the commentary, but he didn't. So maybe that wasn't the reason. Maybe it wasn't a time cut. Maybe that was how it was written. But I would just like to know. I'd love to know. But because after all the effort they went to set it up and then not following through with it. Because within the context of the series, that was the logical thing to happen, using the ghost part of it.
And as far as having the killer doing it in drag, the only reason for that is to fool the audience.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because it's like
exactly.
you say, "Oh, it's a woman." You could see the woman's shoes walking across, and the hem of the dress and all that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
it's sort of a fake, but it does have, of course, the wonderful bit with Marty dancing across the stage with the showgirls.
Which was one
So
of the many funny things they put in.
yes,
Yeah. Because they devised an awful lot of extra business that went into the show, and that was one of them. And it was simply going to be Marty and Jeff in the wings, waiting to go on for the by reading out. And they said, well, wouldn't it be? It's always funny when the ghost lands in the wrong place. So they had Marty, all right, has appeared at the other end of the stage. That's the one. That's the funny thing. He's at the wrong place. Jeff is sort of beckons to go over here. Oh, me. He's about to do the usual disappearing bit,
yeah,
and
yeah,
decides to dance across the stage amid all the
yeah,
chorus girls, and it's hilarious. And they obviously liked it because they used it again in another episode.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
let's
put
do this again. We can't waste this. But of course, again, because of the transmission order, they were widely separated and gave the viewers just about long enough to have forgotten about its original appearance. I think.
right, which is another pitfall, is the reusing of sets and props.
Oh, that Daly's Theatre poster. How many places does that show up in? It's in
Well,
the
that
Hopkirk.
and
That yeah.
there's so many episodes where they go into a to some sort of estate house with this big hall, a big long staircase, and a balcony,
Mm,
and they just paint the walls a different color. It's just like,
yeah.
yeah, we've
And,
we've
and
seen this before. It's like,
yeah. Oh, yeah, they redressed the sets, and it wasn't just the same show. I mean, the other shows, every Department S
yeah,
had
oh
that
yeah,
set a few times, and
all the ITC shows.
yeah, and there was and also external locations. There was a hotel, the name of which escapes me, that they used for big country houses more than once. You know, they wanted a mansion. This place came in handy, and so actually they were picking locations really, I think, for convenience to the studios too, up in Elstree, and the one with whether in the theatre. You know, we're allowed to assume that it's a central London theatre, a West End theatre. It wasn't. It was in Watford, Palace Theatre in Watford, which was not a great distance from where they were based. So, but again, it all saves time
Yeah,
and money, and also, of course, that brings us to the second unit stuff, the use of doubles. While the main cast are at Elstree filming the main scenes, their lookalikes are out on the location in long shot, doing the stuff, getting in and out of the car, or walking through a field, or whatever, which was standard practice, of course. It was just help them to keep to schedule.
yeah. Another good thing, which of course would, the answer because it would ruin the show, is why don't more murder victims just tell Marty?
Yeah, yeah. Why does he have exclusivity on not
Yeah,
being able to rest until his murder's solved? Why did the others? Because they won't have, gone on. Just that Marty had not yet gone on to the next world. He hadn't reported, or as he put it, I think. Yeah, why do they not do the same? Particularly the psycho who's after him in Vendetta for
yes,
a Dead Man. You'd think if anybody was going to be restless and come back as a spirit to give him a hard time, it would be him. But no, he just goes over the cliff and that's the end.
yeah,
So, but again, you have to suspend disbelief.
yeah, or
Um,
else it just wouldn't work.
no.
Things like that, Marty's insurance policies.
Yeah. In one episode, apparently, the pilot, apparently Jeff says he'd been paying into all these policies and so on. And yet in the subsequent episode, he says, that Jeannie hasn't really been left anything in the way of money. So,
She must
so
have
that
she must have spent it all right away.
but on a fancy men, like Emil.
We forgot the one person aside from the psychics and the dogs is Anton Rogers.
Oh, when he's drunk, yes,
Yes, there's a character
yes,
he's a con man, but he can see and hear Marty when he's drunk.
yeah. Yeah, and of course
So which
Marty has to, and Marty eventually realizes how it is because initially wants to surprise Jeff and say, "Look, he can see and hear me," and he can't. And then he
yeah,
eventually works out that his name's Bream. He drinks
yeah,
like a fish. He can only he can only see and hear Martin when he's had a few, and he
yeah.
uses it. He gets Bream drunk, but it's having scared him off the drink. Um, he then finds it expedient to persuade to somehow maneuver it, so he finds the bottle of whiskey that's in the cabinet and gets hammered again.
So
But he
he can
needs
see
it.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was a fun episode, and the episode with Marty's aunt,
Oh, the wonderful.
the
Oh,
ghost who broke the bank at Monte Carlo.
save the bank at Monte Carlo.
Oh, the saved the bank at Monte Carlo. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's Mary Merrill, a veteran actress who I won't go into too much detail, but well, yeah, I think we're talking about pre-First World War and thereabouts. She was like the toast of the West End, and I believe was not a stranger to scandal, shall we say, without going to Google her. It's all
Yeah.
there. but she was what my late mother would have called a bit of a girl. She was, and And by that time, she was playing these older women, but there was a lot more to her. I mean, she would turn up in the Sir Francis Drake series as an estranged European queen or something like that, very grand, that sort of thing. But she was a pin-up in the 1910s. A couple of years ago, I've got a greeting card for my wife actually. She's been seeing these with me sometimes, these episodes. And I found this wonderful greeting card. It was for a birthday or something like that. And there it was, Mary Merrill, working on the land with a shovel, working on a garden or something, in about 1917. Yeah. And I knew she'd know this woman from much older. It allowed me to do a gag anyway. And I just thought, oh, yes, I'm getting this guy. But yes, she was a famous stage beauty in time of the First War and earlier.
Well, so she's Marty's aunt, and she's worked out a system for
Roulette.
for roulette, and she's going to Monte. So they all go off to Monte Carlo to work this system.
Courtesy of stock film.
Yes, exactly. It was a lot of ITC shows, but yeah. So, but she doesn't. Was it? She didn't realize Marty was dead.
Yeah. Why does his aunt not know he's dead? And Martine grumbles that she didn't come to the funeral.
Yeah,
They could just as easily have had aware of his death, but needing a detective as a bodyguard, go to his firm, because she would have known about the partnership, presumably about his wife. They were still the go-to people anyway. Why not just go there in the knowledge? Oh, my dear late nephew, said you're a great friend and a detective. Perhaps you can help me. They could have done it that way instead of having to turn up and finding out then that Marty was dead. There was no need to have done it that way. And
yeah. The other thing that we've pointed out is that his headstone.
oh yes, there were no dates. Of
No
course,
dates.
that would date the series at least if they did
Right.
that. And maybe they thought perhaps even maybe tempt fate, as regards what might happen to the real life actor. You never know. Show business of superstitious people.
But not only that, but they have him as Marty.
Marty, yeah,
Yeah,
and
on the headstone.
yeah, not Martin Hopkirk, and beneath in quotes Marty. It's actually Marty Hopkirk,
Yeah.
which you wouldn't expect. His auntie refers to him as Marty, whereas she addresses Jeff with the more formal Jeffrey. So Jeff is Jeffrey, but her nephew Martin is Marty, the familiar form. So there's an inconsistency there. Marty only gets referred to as Martin once, and I think this is in Somebody Just Walked Over My Grave, when they're going to the cemetery and they're inquiring as to the plot and so on. And it's Hopkirk, Martin. That's the only time he's ever referred to as Martin McDonald.
It's written on the plot.
Yeah, it's on the plot,
but,
plot number.
On the documentation, but not on the headstone. So.
Not on the headstone, it's in the documentation. And apparently the original script of what became the Ghost Talks, which we mentioned earlier, apparently there was some dialogue there where the guy was saying, oh, he was an idiot, I knew in the army, Martin Hopkirk. So that was in the script, but it didn't get used, as I recall, unless I missed that. But no, he was, it's Martin Hopkirk, known as Marty, but on the headstone you would think it would be Martin, but no.
Well, one other thing I wanted to point out was the one time that Jeff appears as a ghost.
Oh, yes. Yeah, which is... well, there's another story about that being used again many years later, but let's not go there now. But yes, that was, where he's effectively drowned.
He drowns, and Marty's trying to get someone to rescue him. The fisherman pulling him out of the lake, and for a brief moment, he appears in the white suit next to Marty. But it just disappointed me. He just kind of looks at him. He doesn't talk to him or anything. It's almost like, he's just there.
He's giving him a look, though, because he knows that it's thanks to Marty he's been dumped in this position.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
He's peeved, And, oh no! And he blinks Jeff back into his body.
Yeah.
But he's only there in the first place because Marty diverted him from the case he was going to sort out what he believed to be the murder. He goes to
It's
the
true. It is
family
all
home.
his fault for that.
Yes, he manoeuvred this, and Jeff knows that. So that's why
Yeah,
he's so peeved about being drowned because of
yeah,
Marty.
yeah. So,
Uh, I,
so let's wrap up by telling people, recommending episodes. Of course, if you're totally new to the series, the very first episode is the one you should watch.
yes,
My late
late.
lamented friend and partner, or partner and friend,
It's friend and partner. Yes,
friend and partner.
yeah.
So
You need to see that first.
you need to see that first. But aside from that, what are your favorite episodes?
Well,
We've
we've
probably
covered what.
mentioned them already. Yeah,
Well, a distirbing case
a
with
disturbing case.
with the dope Jeff Randall. That is probably the funniest of the lot. And no, and if I had to pick out another one, it would probably be Murder Ain't What It Used to Be, when Marty meets the ghost of a 1930s American gangster, played by David Healy, who was one of the many North Americans who were based over here. Alan Gifford was another one who was also in that episode, and he is the man who bumped off Bugsy Spanier in 1933. And
Yeah,
Bugsy Spanier, the gangster, has been hunting him, not haunting him, hunting him ever since, trying to kill him, always without success, of course. And with the Randall and Hopkirk set up, he sees an opportunity finally to dispatch his old rival. Thinks he can use the ghost and the living guy in tandem to take out his old enemy. And I would recommend that one. So yeah, I think those 3 out of 26. But it's so difficult because it's so consistently good. There are 1 or 2 that are lesser in my opinion, but they're still very good. It's like
right.
trying to choose between one's children or relatives, you know. It's very difficult, but they've put on the spot, which I have been. I'll go with those.
I would
What about
say
you?
that I would say those. As we mentioned, but what a sweet little room is good.
Hmm?
Um, when the spirit moves you, with as we mentioned, with
Yeah.
Anton Rogers as Calvin P. Bream.
Yes.
Uh, that's how murder snowballs, with the setup in the theater, mainly for the comedy, not for the plot holes.
Oh yeah.
Just for the record, we haven't mentioned that.
With that wonderful gag with the car later on. It was
Yes,
second unit doubles, but do we tell them?
yeah. Please.
Okay. A pursuit in Jeff's car along the Thames embankment after the bad guys who are in a launch, a boat of some sort, and Marty's trying to watch it so to get a better view. He sits cross-legged on the roof of Jeff's car. It's fantastic. That cracked me up at the time. It still does, and I think there was, because of the way that it worked out with the series and its erratic screenings at the time, there was never any merchandising when they were first shown. But at the time, I thought, okay, like Corgi Toys they do a James Bond car, they're doing the Saints Aston Martin and so on. Why aren't they doing a Randall and Hopkirk car? And I felt that they
Already on the
could.
top.
That's it, Jeff's car with Marty sitting on the top, just based on that one gag. It would have worked wonderfully as as a series time, but they never did it. So
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
somebody will do it now.
that one also ends up with Jeff and the heroine tied up and suspended in the warehouse. It's the plot
Hmm.
is that there's this man who's trying to prove that he is the rightful king of England,
Yes.
and so he's using this whole thing to get in the official records, in the archives, to prove that he's the official king of England.
Yeah, and they used, of course, some stock footage of the most interesting kind for that. It was the burning warehouse. Um, Maybe a couple of years earlier, the neighbouring building to the studios at L Street had caught fire, and Monty Berman had the presence of mind to tell his guys to get there and film it
Yeah,
because it could come in useful. And I think they used it more than once, and it certainly came in very handy for that episode. But it was a
yes.
real live conflagration that unit had filmed a year or two earlier.
Okay,
And
so
it works brilliantly.
there are our recommendations. There are, as Glenn has shown, there are multiple DVD sets out. Now that
Mm.
network is no longer in business, This is the one I have,
Okay.
and it actually comes with, which is probably one of the reasons they're out of business because they did such wonderful things. This set had two guides in it.
Hmm.
They just were tremendous.
They did a lovely
So
job. Yeah.
you could probably find them on eBay
Yeah.
or
And this, yeah, and eBay and else. And there's this, which again from Network, it's the score, the wonderful Edwin Astley score. We haven't said much about that, but
no.
three CDs from the original quarter-inch tapes. Mostly, it's a wonderful thing if you want to sit through just the music for a long time. It really is a wonderful score.
It is.
Try and
It's
get
worth
this.
having just to listen to the music.
It really is. Yeah.
They did a wonderful job. And if you don't have DVDs, they do. I believe they're on Amazon for Amazon Prime or Amazon On Demand for $1.99 over here per episode. But it's also on YouTube. There are complete episodes on YouTube. So
Right.
if you're just looking for a cheap watch, you can watch the first episode free on YouTube, and if you become a fan, you can go in for the DVDs or the soon to becoming Blu-rays, and
Yeah.
just really enjoy it.
Yeah. Have you ever seen this?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, this was published back in 1994, written by Jeff Tibbles, and it's a nice history of the show. And I bought this about 30 years ago, actually, from a now sadly vanished comedy store in the Mortlake area. It's another guy ran it. And you don't see that book around much now, but it's worth grabbing if you can. It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we hope that you will either be reintroduced to Randall and Hopkirk deceased. Oh, before I go, we forgot the most outrageous thing of all. If you're in America and you're looking on IMDb,
the title.
the title when they tried to sell it in America. So actually, so yeah, so they this is a rare ITC show because they didn't have an American in it, at least not in the main cast. So it didn't help to sell it overseas, and they didn't do any more seasons because they couldn't sell it overseas. It didn't show up into America until about 1973, and
Two or three.
it had the absolutely horrible title. Cover your ears. My Partner, the Ghost.
Yes, after inspired by my mother, the car, I
My
think.
Mother, the Car. Oh, that's yeah. So if you wanted to copy something that's really another hit,
Yeah,
you should
yeah,
copy My Mother, the Car.
yeah. Do you remember my
So
great uncle, the hat stand? Didn't do
no,
nearly so well.
but I've used him quite often. I I loaned him a cap the other day. So
Well, I've got to take a hat off to it.
so anyway, as again I said at the beginning, please um, hit subscribe, hit like. We're available now on YouTube. We're available on Spotify. We're available on Apple Podcasts. But wherever you are,
We
like
might, we
it.
might, we might even pop up the living room,
That's right.
like Marty,
We could do a Marty for you. But
Yeah,
wherever you see us, like us, subscribe to us. We would
please do.
greatly appreciate it. And I think
Yes,
shall we
please.
both go as Marty would?
Oh, I think we have to.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it's on the count of three.
Three.
One,
One,
two,
two.
three.